لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. We continue this week with a new subject, but under wudu also, and that is in Arabic is called al-masah al-khuffayn wal-jawrabayn wal-lafa'if, meaning that you use khuf or socks or some wrappings around the feet, or masah, right? When we speak about khuf, I want to explain that part. Khuf is seen as a leather shoe that was worn in the time of the Sahaba. It was soft, it was leather, they walked on it, they went into wars and into battle walking on it. So it was a daily shoe kind of thing in the time of the Sahaba. Today we have a different way of wearing a khuf. People don't walk on khuf anymore. They put their feet into a slipper or a sandal or something like that, and that is how it's worn. But in terms of the lesson, a khuf is therefore a very soft leather shoe that is worn by males and females, right? And in terms of wudu, you are allowed to wipe over it, and it is permissible for usage for a person that is a musafir, a traveler, as well as one that is muqim, one that is resident, meaning not a traveler. It is permissible for males and females, whether it be for a specific need or whether there is no specific need. But the important part of it is that it takes the place of washing your feet again. You don't need to wash your feet after you have taken wudu. There are many ahadith that are authentic. It's perfect in its tawatur, in its succession, wherein the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam had given permission to wear the khuf and to wipe over it, right? So khuf is the singular, and khuffayn, well, depending on the place in the sentence, but generally khuffayn would be two. We have a tendency here to say khufs, which is it's English and Arabic together to make the plural. That when people say masjid, the plural is masajid, but then they say masajids. So it's a plural on top of a plural and so on. But for the benefit of our lesson, and we are here to learn, and that is khuf or khufain, right? Generally people have only 2 feet. Is that clear? No. Right. So therefore, Al-Imam Al-Hasan Al-Basri rahimahullah, he says that I have spoken to 70 of the Sahaba of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, in that the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam has said it's permissible to wipe on the khuffayn, khuffayn. Hammam al-Nahi, he speaks about Jarir ibn Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he says he was urinating, and after urinating he took wudu and he wiped over the khuf. So they asked him, what is this? What are you doing? Didn't you just urinate? You're supposed to wash your feet. Right? And he then says, yes, I am wiping over it. رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بال ثم توضأ ومسح خفيه. I saw that the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam had also urinated and then taken wudu and wiped over the khuf. Right? Ibn al-Mubarak rahimahullah, he says, ليس في المسح على الخفين عن الصحابة اختلاف. There is no difference of opinion as far as the Sahaba was concerned about wiping on the khuf. So now we understand the permissibility of it. But when wearing the khuf, there is conditions attached to it on wearing it. Number one, you cannot put on a khuf unless you have taken wudu and you washed your feet, and after that you're in a state of tahara and you put on the khuf. So that's the first thing. You must have first taken wudu. So let's assume by Fajr you decide, I'm going to wear it for the day. So which means Fajr you're going to wash your feet, and then you're going to put on the khuf or socks and so on, and you are going to go through the rest of the day by merely wiping on top of it. Right? So that's the first thing. The Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam in a hadith narrated by Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, he says, I was in travel with the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, and then I brought a bucket of water for wudu. So after the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam had washed his face, arms, wiped over his head, and then I bent down to take off the khuf. So the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam stopped me and said, دعهما فإني أدخلتهما طاهرتين فمسح عليهما. Leave it on my feet, because I have put it on when I had taken wudu. In other words, I washed my feet already. So now the Nabi alayhi salam only wiped over it. Right? روي الحميدي في مسنده قال قلنا يا رسول الله أن يمسح أحدنا على الخفين. So they asked the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, this khuffain that we are wearing, the two khuf that we are wearing, can we wipe on it instead of taking it off and letting the water go over the feet? So they asked, can we wipe on it? So the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam responded, نعم إذا أدخلهما وهما طاهرتان. Yes, if you have, your feet is clean, meaning that you have taken wudu and you washed your feet, then your feet is in a position of cleanliness. That is number one. Number two, that when we put it on, that the khuf in itself must be clean. There can't be najis on it. And by the way, it cannot be made of najis. Let me add that also. There cannot be any najis on it. When you put it on, it must be clean. Number three, أن يكون ساترا للقدمين, and that it covers the feet. If there are holes in, then there's nothing wrong with it. Remember I told you at the beginning that the Sahaba wore this khuf in everyday life of theirs. Whether they've been in the fields, whether they've gone to the souk, whether they've gone to the masjid, whether they went into battle. And history records that when they were in battle and they went up the mountains, it would break. And in battle you would see that they got so hurt that the blood came out there by the holes that was there. So even if there's a hole in, it does not invalidate it. Right? Then number four, أن يكون قويا يمكن تتابع المشي فيه عادة. That it is strong enough for you to walk on. Now, these two last conditions, the one that it must completely cover the feet, and the second that it must be strong enough to walk on, ulama differ in terms of those two last conditions. And somebody like Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he says that I don't feel that these are applicable because there is no valid hadith that authenticates that action. So you see the difference of opinion amongst ulama. So, now we put it on, we say that we are on travel, how long can I wear it? If I'm going to be at home, how long can I wear it? So the ulama says that you can wear it 3 days and 3 nights when you're on travel to make your life easy. When you go to take wudu and so on, then it makes your life easy just to wipe on the khuf instead of having to put your feet up into today if you travel, you have to put your feet up into the hand basin of the airports and wherever you go. And then these other people come in that are not Muslim and they look, what is this? Put your feet into the hand basin. What kind of uncouth people are this, and whatever the case may be. But nevertheless, this is how it helps us in modern day thing. Traveling is 3 days and 3 nights while you're traveling. Or you go down, travel somewhere, wherever it be, on holiday or whatever the case may be, or you work out of Cape Town and so on, then it means that you can have it on 3 days and 3 nights. Right? If you are resident, if you are not traveling, if you are at home, then it's only a day and a night. So let's assume that you've taken wudu the morning for Fajr, and you washed your feet, put on the khuf, and then you can go whole day by just wiping over your feet until tonight or tomorrow morning Fajr, then it expired. You must redo the whole thing. Right? So a day and a night. But nobody goes sleep with khuf on, so you'll probably take it off when you go sleep, and we'll deal with that part. So therefore it is permissible for the person that then puts on, that's a traveler, to wipe over that khuf while traveling whenever he needs to make, after taking or while taking wudu. Whether that wudu is going to be for salah, whether it's going to be for reading the Holy Quran and things like that, but it is at the time of wudu without removing it any one time. Without removing it any one time. Because you will see under the conditions that breaks that khuf's ruling of usage is if you have removed it. Right? But we'll come to that, inshallah ta'ala. عن شريح ابن هاني قال سألت عائشة عن المسح على الخفين فقالت سل عليا فإنه أعلم بهذا مني كان يسافر مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Shuraih ibn Hani radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he asked Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha about the khuf and the rules around it. So she says, go to Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu because he is more knowledgeable than me. He traveled with the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he then asked Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, and Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu says that the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said, لِلْمُسَافِرْ ثَلَاثَةَ أَيَّامْ وَلَيَالِيهِنَّ وَلِلْمُقِيمِ يَوْمَ وَلَيْلَةٍ. The Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says you can have it on for 3 days and 3 nights, and for the person who is resident is only going to be a day and a night. So how do we do that in terms of the khuf? When we have now taken wudu and we wear the khuf for the day, and let's assume that you put it on Fajr in the morning, so here comes Dhuhr. Here comes Dhuhr, and you now simply wet your hand and you wipe on top of it. And you wet your hand and you wipe on top of the other one. Alright? You do not wipe at the bottom of it. You wipe on top of it. If you wipe only at the bottom of it, then it doesn't apply. Then you have not completed the wudu. Now, وَقَدْ رَأَيْتُ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ يَمْسَحْ عَلَى ظَاهِرِ خُفَّيْهِ. He says, if the deen was according to opinion, then it should have been more befitting to wipe under the khuf than on top of the khuf, because you walk on the earth, right? But I saw the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam wipe only on top of the khuf one time. Right? Now we come to the one that is an interesting one. And that is the socks that we wear. And in the modern day era that we have. So I want to leave you with this. And that is that majority of the ulama of the madahib says you cannot wear socks in terms of taking, because mustn't be, water cannot penetrate it, and it cannot have a hole in it, and it must be strong enough to walk on. More contemporary ulama like Ibn Taymiyyah, and it is taken from Sahaba that has also done that, indicates that it is permissible to, that socks in today's time has replaced the khuf. That the socks in today's time has replaced the khuf. So in other words, if you take wudu in the morning and you put on your socks, and then during the rest of the day, that it is permissible in order for you to simply wipe on top of it. And there's a whole discussion that I recorded for you about it, but I'm not going to go. If you want me to, then we can do it next week, inshallah ta'ala, if you feel that you want to have more explanation in terms of that. But those are the two opinions in terms of the ulama. They say that was in the time of the Sahaba, that was the norm for them to wear that leather khuf. In today's time, people don't do that anymore. It is not the norm. The norm is to put on socks. Then we speak about things that are covering your feet, like dressings. If you dressings on in terms of a wound that a person has, or sore feet, and so you put the dressing over your foot and so on. And is it permissible? As well as costs, whether that cost is over your feet or whether it is on your arms and so on. But we're now dealing with that, and that is that it's simply permissible to wipe over that cost that's on your feet, or if there is any dressings that you put on because of injury or because of sore feet, then you simply wipe on it. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah says it's only obvious that you can wipe over that because it is used for a specific purpose, and if you're going to remove it, then it is going to cause you harm. If you're going to remove it, you might have put it on because the weather was severely cold, and that will cause you harm. So therefore, by Ibn Taymiyyah, it's completely permissible to wipe over those dressings. So what is going to make the khuf batil? What brings it to an end? First of all, the khuf takes the same ruling as wudu. So which means that if you have broken your wudu under normal circumstances, whether it be by urinating or whether it's the wind that you passed, but the wudu is broken, then it doesn't mean that your khuf is protected, you don't need to wipe over it again. It means like you take wudu normally, you have to wipe over that again. Right? That's number one. Number two, when the period comes to its end, then the period of the khuf has come to its end. Right? So in other words, if you've completed 3 days and 3 nights while wearing it, then after that, it has come to its end, you must wash your feet again, and so on. Ek weet hoe lekker die voete gaan ruik as it, 3 days and 3 nights, hard work and so on. Some people are heavy when it comes to that. You can go stand there sometimes by the shoe rack, and it gives you an idea of how smells can be dangerous and so on. So when Iman or Buta Ahmad cleans there, they leave it to the wind blow through 12 hours, then they come back later on and then they tackle that part. But it can be very stinky. And then also, It will also become batil if you remove it at any one time. If you remove it, then khalas, then it is no longer applicable. That is in terms of the khuf. We move over to another subject, al-ghusl. Ghusl is nothing uncommon to us. What does it simply mean? It means that your whole body is covered in water, right? There's nothing that is left uncovered. And the purpose of it, obviously, is to remove whatever najasa or ritual impurities and things like that is there, so that you are ready for ibadat. Our Sharia has put that in place, so that it's a means and ways of how to clean your body. If there's one thing about this deen, it doesn't leave anything untouched. Even if you go to the toilet, it tells you how to enter, what to do inside, everything in terms of stinja and all of those, the deen doesn't leave. And the same applies when you are in a state of janaba, where a husband and wife have slept together, or there was ihtilam. Now I want to ask, allow me to use this word ihtilam throughout when we carry on, inshallah ta'ala. Ihtilam means to have a wet dream. I don't like that word. It sounds better as you say ihtilam, as what you say that. So the word ihtilam means a wet dream, and these are all things. Right. So when we speak about the need for a ghusl, there are different categories that applies to ghusl. There are a category of the requirements that causes you to have a ghusl. There is the fard part of the ghusl. There is the sunan part of the ghusl, and certain ahkam, certain rules that are specific. When we speak about that, which is a requirement when a ghusl is needed, is that the first of that is if there had been excretion coming out of any semen or sperm, whether that be while you were sleeping or whether it be when you have been awake. There's a nice hadith of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam as a qa'idah, as a rule. The Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, innamal ma'u minal ma. Innamal ma'u minal ma. Simply put in English, meaning that a ghusl or bathing is obligatory in case of a discharge, and in this case means a semen discharge or a sperm discharge. Then it requires a ghusl. So from water comes water, if you're not going to go with direct thing, and that is what is meant. So in this our case, it means that you have to take a ghusl if there has been any sperm or something like that that you've seen. All right? But if that sperm or semen has come out because of illness, then there is no ghusl required, because it then takes the hukum of a person that urinated, meaning that you only need to istinja and then take wudu in terms of that. So it's like a person that is urinated. So wudu is there. The hadith of the Sahabi and Mujahid radiallahu anhu قال بين نحن أصحاب ابن Abbas حلقة. Yes, a nice lesson for us to learn from this fiqh story. Let me say that. He says that we were in the masjid with Ibn Abbas, and we were a group, they were like his students. Tawus is one person, Sa'id ibn Jubair is another person, and Ikrimah. And Ibn Abbas, Qa'im Yusalli, he was making salah. إذ وقف علينا رجل فقال هل من مفتي. Then a man came into the masjid and he said, is there a mufti here? Now today in Cape Town, it's a dangerous question to ask, because you can have, there's hundreds and thousands of muftis in Cape Town. Everybody qualified by Google. They can all give you answers. If a man comes into the masjid, the first thing, you need an answer. Ek sal vir jou sê. Ek weet. And whatever the case may be. So it's very dangerous, and you will see here the grave mistake that a person can make that has not studied. Right. So they ask him, he says, is there mufti? They say, yeah, ask. What do you want? He says, every time when I urinate, then there's a thick fluid that follows it. So they ask him, you mean that fluid where a child is born from, meaning sperm, semen, right? And he says, yes. And they say, well, then you must take a ghusl. And the man turns around and he, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, he says, walks out. Because can you imagine, for every time he goes and urinates, he must go take a ghusl. That's very difficult. Our deen is not a difficult deen. Meanwhile, Ibn Abbas, hearing the conversation while he's making salah, tries to finish as soon as possible, and he says, bring that man back. Alayya bil rajul. And then he speaks to them. Ibn Abbas now approaches these three that gave the hukum, that said, you need a ghusl. So he asked them, أَرَأَيْتُمْ مَا أَفْتَيْتُمْ بِهِ هَذَا الرَّجُلُ عَنْ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. The fatwa that you just given that man, is it from the book of Allah? Is it from the Holy Quran that you have given your fatwa? And all of them says, no. We don't know if it was in the Quran. Okay. فَعَنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. So he said, maybe hadith, you heard from the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, that he has said something like that? And they said, no. And then he said, now how did you get to the answer? How did you manage to give a fatwa? There's no Quran involved, there's no hadith involved. How did you get to that? So they said, but our opinion. Huh? Our opinion. And then he says, فلذلك قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقيه واحد أشد على الشيطان من ألف عابد. That the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, one alim in fiqh is more worse on shaitan than 1,000 worshippers. Right? So meaning that a person that answers in deen, I don't know where to put this thing anymore. A person that answers in deen is better than 1,000 worshippers, because 1,000 worshippers, while they are good musallis and in the masjid regularly, doesn't make them a mufti. It doesn't give them understanding. They're in obedience to Allah. But the daraja of giving a fatwa to a person requires much more than just being a normal musalli. So there comes the man. And he comes to Ibn Abbas and he says, أرأيت إذا كان ذلك منك أتجد شهوة في قبلك. When you see the semen that comes out, do you feel that there is a desire in your private part? All right, meaning there's an erection. Do you see that there's a desire there? He says, no, there's no desires. He asked him, do you feel sleepy or lethargy in your body when this happens? And he says, no, nothing like that. And then he says, that is but a discharge that you have. So the only thing that you need to do is to clean yourself and take wudu. That you clean yourself and that wudu. And that is the answer to that. So we can see how we can possibly mislead people by giving an answer on something in deen that we had not gone in depth of. So then, what if a person now, after sleeping, sees that he is having a sexual encounter in his sleep, But when he wakes up, he finds that there is no semen that's discharged. Should he now still take a ghusl? Remember what the Nabi alayhi salam said. إِنَّمَا الْمَاء مِنَ الْمَاء. If there is nothing discharged, then there is no ghusl needed. If there's been nothing discharged, then there is no ghusl needed. But if a person sees on their clothes or their pajamas when they wake up and see that there is mani, there is semen or sperm on the clothes, but they don't remember whether they had an ihtilam or not, then the fact that it is there requires a ghusl. Alright? The fact that it is there requires a ghusl. In the words of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, سئل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الرجل يجد البلل ولا يذكر احتلاما. A man came to the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam and he said he experienced a wetness, but I didn't have any ihtilam. So the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said to him, يغتسل and يغتسل, that you must take a ghusl. And then came a person who said, I see I had an ihtilam, but I wasn't wet. There was no semen or sperm or anything like that. So the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam then told him, there's no ghusl upon you. At this point in stage, ask Salim. Now remember, these are men that came to the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. So one would have to ask, now what in the case of a woman? The women experience this. So this woman, Salim radiallahu ta'ala anha, she then breaks the ice and she says, هل على المرأة إن ترى ذلك غسل? If a woman must experience an ihtilam, does she also take a ghusl? So the Nabi alayhi salam said, yes, women are similar to men. The women are similar to men. So therefore, if a person gets up from sleep and then you go and make salah and afterwards realizes, hey, there is something here, then you must make that salah over. If a person has made more than one salah after getting up from sleep and then realizing done one, two salahs already, then you look at from the time, or whether it's 3, that you slept until the time that you realize those are the salahs that you do over. Right? From the time, does everybody understand it? From the time that you have slept, then you got up and you made salah. Let's say you made salah for Zuhr, you made salah for Asr, you made salah for Maghrib, and then you realize, all right, listen, here's something. Then it means you counted from where you started. All right? Everybody, we are coming to number 2. Let me see if I can quickly cover this. Then also, the next thing that requires your ghusl is when the male and female private parts meet. What does it mean by when they meet? It means that there has been an entry from the male side into the female side. There has been penetration. Whether nothing happens after that, whether there's been fluids released or not released, then it still requires a ghusl. It still requires a ghusl. Whether fluids have been expressed or not expressed, it still requires a ghusl from them. Number 3, that a ghusl is required is when a woman comes at the end of her hayd or nifas, which is blood that comes out because of childbirth. And Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ فَأْتُوهُنَّ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ. Do not approach your women while they are not clean. When they are clean, then you approach them as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders. Another point in when people get to have to take a ghusl is when a person has died. When a person has passed on, then a ghusl must be given to that person, and that is ijma', except a person that's a shaheed. Except a person that's a shaheed gets buried with his blood. So the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah, that blood is a witness for him, the shaheed, or shaheedah, a female. That blood is a witness for both of them, and that blood will smell better than the smell of musk. Number 5, the person that is non-Muslim that becomes Muslim must also take a ghusl. The Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam ordered all those that became Muslim that they must all take a ghusl. I want to end up with the story of narrated by Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu. The Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam had sent a cavalry out, and then they came across a person that they took into they took into custody. His name was Thumama ibn Athal. Ibn Uthal. He is from the Bani Hanifa tribe. He was the chief of Al-Yamama, and they was taken in. So when they tied him against the tree, and the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam would come to him and say, Ma indak ya Umama, meaning, what are you expecting? And he said, Ya Rasulullah, if you, well, not Ya Rasulullah, he says, I'm expecting, if you show me a favor, meaning you let me live, then I'll be very grateful to it. If you kill me, well, then it will be because I have killed somebody else. And if you want any property, I'll give you as much as you want. The next day, the Nabi leaves. Next day, Nabi comes again. Ma indak ya Yamama. He says the same thing. If you let me live, I'll be very grateful. But if you kill me, then it is, well, it's for someone else that has been killed. And if you want any property, then I will give you whatever you want. The third day, the Nabi alayhi salam comes to him and he says exactly the same thing. And then the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, free Umama. Set him free. And then Thumama. And then Thumama then goes out into a place, he takes a bath, and he comes back into the masjid, and he says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. He then says, Wallahi, Ya Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that there was no face on the earth more hateful to me than your face, until your face has become the most beloved to me. He says, there is no religion, there's no deen that was more hateful to me than your deen, until your deen has become the most loved deen to me. There is no town that was more hated by me than your town, until it became the most beloved town to me. And then he says, Ya Rasulullah, I was on my way to go perform Umrah. Do you think I should still go? And the Nabi alayhi salam said, go and go perform your Umrah. And when he got to Makkah, the people were almost like mocking him. What did you leave off your deen? What is this? And he said, or like you've been foolish or something like that. And he says, no, I've accepted Islam at the hands of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. But I'm telling you people this, there is not going to come a grain of wheat to use in Makkah unless Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam gives permission for that. So these are, the crux of the matter here is, I quoted you the whole thing, which is a beautiful story. But the fact that he became Muslim, because the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam had ordered him to go take a ghusl when he became Muslim. May Allah Ta'ala make us all min al-muttaqeen, wa min al-muhsinin, wa min ibadi al-salihin, wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. I only noticed now I forgot to put on the Mixlr.